Good day, ma'am. Today I will discussing to you my topic. My topic is all about non-translation theorists. There are six non-translation theories. The first one is the social linguistic approach. According to the social linguistic approach to translation, the social context define what is and what is not translatable and what is or what is not acceptable through selection, filtering, and even censorship. According to this perspective, a translator is necessarily the product of his or her society. Our own socio-cultural background is present in everything we translate. Sociolinguistic approach, the descriptive study of the effect of any or all aspect of society, including cultural norms, expectation, context, on the way language is used, and society effect on language. For example, sociolinguistic is the study includes gender language differences, regional differences, and how social class impact language use. So there are two approach of sociolinguistic. The first one is the micro-sociolinguistic, the study of language system in the abstract with no regard to national content or meaning of linguistic expressions. The second one is the micro-sociolinguistic, the study of what society do with their language, bilingual, educational, law, language planning, language reform, and etc. The second one is the communicative approach. The theory is referred to as interpretive. Scholars Danica Saleskovich and Marian Lederer developed what they called the theory of sense, based chiefly on the experience of conference interpreting. According to this perspective, meaning must be translated, not language. Communicative approach is based on the idea that learning language successfully comes through having to communicate real meaning. There are principles of communicative approach. Language learning is learning to communicate using the target language. Next, the language used to communicate must be appropriate to the situation, the rules of the speakers, the setting, and the register. The learner needs to differentiate between formal and informal style. Communicative activities are essential. Activities should be presented in a situation or context and having a communicative. Typic- Typical activities of this approach are games, problem solving tasks, and role play. There should be informed gap, choice, and feedback involved in the activities. Learning must have constant interacting with an exposure to the target language. Development of the four macro skills speaking, listening, reading, and writing is integrated from the beginning since communication integrates the different skills. The last is the topic are selected and graded regarding the needs level and society interested. Next is the hermeneutic approach. Hermeneutic approach is mainly based on George Steiner research. Steiner believed of any human communication as a translation. His book After Bible shows that translation is not a science but an art. A true translator should be capable of becoming a writer in order to capture what the author of the original text means to say. Next, the hermeneutic approach holds the most basic fact of social life in the beginning of an action. Next, the four types of hermeneutic approach. The literal interpretation asserts in asserts that a biblical context is to be interpreted according to the plain meaning conveyed by its grammatical construction and historical context. The literal meaning is held to correspond to the intention of the authors. The second type of biblical hermeneutic is the moral interpretation by seeks to establish existential principle by which ethical lessons may be drawn for the various parts of the Bible. The the third one is the allegorical interpretation. A third type of hermeneutic interprets the biblical narrative as having a second level of reference beyond those persons, things, and events implicitly mentioned in the text. A particular from the allegorical interpretation is the typical according to which the key figures main events and principal institution of the Hebrew Bible or Old Testament and seen as type of foreshadowing of persons, events, and objects in the form objects in the New Test. The last is the allegorical or mystical interpretation. This mode seeks to explain biblical events as they relate to or figure the life to come. Such an approach to the life to come, such an approach to be biblical, exemplified by the Jewish Kabbalah, which sought to disclose the mystical significance of the numerical values of Hebrew letter and words. Next is the linguistic approach. Linguistics such as Vinay, Derbalnet, Austin, Vigilant, or Monen interested in language text structuralism and pragmatics also examine process translating this perspective in a translation, whether it is a marketing translation, a medical translation, or legal translation, or another type of text should be considered from the point of view of its fundamental units, that is the word, the syntagm, and the sentence. A method of reading instruction that implies what the child already knows about the language from having learning to speak it. For example, a teaching method which assumes children in the class who participate having a strong grasp their mother tongue, which is then used as an associative learning tools for words and spelling patterns. So, traditional critical approach, there are three under the historical biographical. This approach sees a literary work as a reflection of the author's life and times, or the life and times of the character in the work. Critics using school of thought investigate how plot details, settings, and characters of the work reflect or are representative of events, settings, and people in the author's life, or a direct outgrowth of or reaction to the culture in which the author lived. The second one is the moral philosophical. The approach takes the position that the larger function of literature is to teach moral and to probe philosophical issues such as ethics, religion, of the nature of humanity. Next is the formalistic criticism. Formalistic criticism critics use that everything necessary for analyzing the work is present in the work itself and disregard any connection to possible outside influence such as the author's own life or historical times. This criticism consider what a work says and how it says it is inseparable issues. It focuses on close reading with sensitive to the words and various. The other one is the ap- new newer approaches to literary criticism. The first one is the sociological criticism. The approach deals with a work of literature primarily as it is an expression in fictional form of the author's personality, mindset, feelings, and desires. It also requires that we investigate the psychology of the characters and their most in order to figure out the work's meaning. Second one is the feminist or the gender criticism. The approach asks to use a wide variety of issues rela- related to gender concerning the author, the work itself, the reader, and the societies of the authors and reader too. Critics would argue that in order to achieve validity, a literary consciousness, feminist critics looks for the development of male and female characters and their motives to see how authors and his or her times affected in gender roles in the work. Mm, the last is the social logical or the Marxist criticism. The viewpoint consider particular aspect of the political content of the text, the author, the historical and sociocultural context of the work, and the cultural, political, and the personal situation of the reader in a relationship to the context. These critics tend to focus on the overall themes of the work as they related to economic, class, race, sex, and instances of oppression and or liberation. Author, critic, and reader bias is explored. The next one is the semiotic approach or the last known translation theorist. Semiotic is the study of sign and signification. A meaning is the result of a collaboration between a sign, an object, and interpreter. Thus, from the perspective of semiotics, translation is thought of as a way of interpreting text in which encyclopedic content varies and its social cultural context is unique. So there are parts of semiotic approach or three: the sign, meaning, and code. So sign, write one name uh, on a letter or card or similar item to identify oneself as the writer or sender. Second one is the meaning. What is meant by a word, text, concept, or action? The last part of semiotic approach is the code, a system of words, letters, figures, or other symbols substituted for other words, letters, etc., especially for the purpose of secrecy. So that all my topic of about the non-translation theorist. I am Arnold M. Sumpo.